Welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. On this episode, it's a crossover episode with our parent podcast, Clinically Pressed, but we are talking with athletic trainers about youth sports injuries. Both Corey Wenzel and Marissa Castaneda are both athletic trainers that help us at UWL, but also work at Mayo Clinic Health System in the La Crosse area. This is all leading up to a symposium we're putting on about youth sports injuries and just trying to address some of the things we need to pay attention to when it comes to overuse of youth athletes, how much they go, how often they go, how hard that is on their body, and just really what are some of the simple things we can do to help reduce those injuries and end up setting them up for a healthy career. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. Please check them out. They do great things for the profession and are always more than willing to listen to what you have to say to get better products to help out athletic trainers. With that, enjoy this episode. Well, welcome to this episode of Clinically Pressed. We are here with Corey Wenzel and Marissa Castaneda.
Yep.
Yes, got it right. Who are both athletic trainers that we work with at UW La Crosse and also with Mayo Clinic Health System in the La Crosse area. We are continuing our youth sports safety discussion with them, as we've kind of mentioned in the other episodes. One on youth nutrition, another with our team physician talking about just injuries in general with youth and the importance of taking care of them. We're continuing that leading up to our symposium on October the 12th in La Crosse, link in the show notes. But today we're going to talk about just overlying how much activity a high school athlete may go through. Corey's done some background research on that and just his experience working in the high school setting. And then beyond that, just talking more with both Corey and Marissa, just the importance of having an athletic trainer or at least anybody that can help see those trends and things that are heading south and hopefully reduce the risk of long-term damage. So with that, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
So, Corey, I know you said you did some research. You looked at just in Wisconsin alone, but an athlete that is three-sport athlete, which isn't totally uncommon, which we'll talk a little bit about specialization later, but three-sport athlete on a winning team. So we're talking conference, regional, sectionals, or sectionals, regional, state, however it breaks down, and like what that looks like in the course of a school year.
Yeah, so in the course of a school year, so personally my background, I've been working high school athletics for 10 years prior to coming and working with Mayo Clinic Health System. So I have a little bit of background knowledge to speak on it and everything, and I understand kind of the high school sports scene a little bit and how the schedules and everything work. So just as an example, if you're a girl playing high school athletics, a three-sport athlete, probably starting with volleyball in the fall, starting middle of August. That goes till, beginning of November if you make the state tournament. From there you transition right into basketball, which can go, if you make it all the way to the state tournament, to the middle of March. And then from there you transition right into the track season, which actually starts before your basketball season ends. Either that or it's soccer, which you'd have a little bit of a gap, a 1 week down week before you get into soccer, or you start up with softball right away. And either of those spring sports would essentially run you into towards the end of the school year, into the beginning to middle part of June. From there, we all know that, and it's important that everybody stays active over the summer, doing things. But how much activity do we want them to do? Everybody's, wanting to pursue the club volleyball, the AAU basketball, club soccer, everything like that. So you try and throw all that stuff into the summer and kind of do it during the school year too, just depending on what practice demands and everything are. And it's the same for the boys too. I mean, starting football, we're starting essentially August 1st is when football practices typically would start for high school. This year I think it was a little bit later. I think they were August 6th or 7th. But that would run all the way to, if you make the state championship game, all the way till almost Thanksgiving. I think it's a few days, but the weekend before Thanksgiving is when the state tournament is this year. From there, you would transition to wrestling, basketball, hockey, whichever it is. That would run you again until kind of the mid to end of March. And then from there, it's right into baseball and or track, which can either be going or not going dependent on what sport you're playing and everything. And so there's this overlap of just all these things that all these kids are doing, not to mention all the lifting that they're doing throughout the school year, throughout the season, to stay on top of their game at their best. So it's just a lot for these, kids to be putting all these additional stresses and everything on their body, and they only have a certain amount of time to get all these things done. Plus you had school that kind of compounds the issue and everything. I mean, where do you fit everything in is where it kind of comes down to. And then, not to kind of lead into the specialization aspect, but you are always going to have those few athletes that's all they want to do is be in the gym shooting hoops or skating on the ice or whatever the case may be, and that's all they're doing all year round. So they think that they're really benefiting themselves and getting themselves ahead of the game by doing this all year round, when not everybody is. But it can also be a detrimental effect to that individual as well, just because you're using the same muscles repetitively over and over and over again and not giving them adequate rest, adequate break from there. So, I mean, that's kind of what an athlete would typically go through, being a three-sport athlete and everything. Again, that's kind of can change, and I mean, not everybody's a three-sport athlete. Some are two, some again are the specialized, thinking that they just want to do one sport and that's it. But that's kind of their background from a high school standpoint, like what their schedule would kind of look like. And again, in the summer, it's just every individual coach, every individual team, they're gonna have requirements in the off season of what they want those individuals and kids to do. And in Wisconsin, they have what are called contact days in the summer. Yep. So you have X amount of days to
summer basketball leagues on top of the AAU team.
Right. Yep. And so in the summer, when there are no classes, there is no schoolwork, they all of a sudden magically have all this time to get all this done. Well, then then they're literally going from 6:30 in the morning lifting, then from there they go to open gym. From there they go and maybe they're in the passing league for football. After that, maybe they have a couple hours to themselves to go hang out with friends and do whatever, and then it's off to Legion baseball and their AAU basketball game or whatever. And that's not even getting into tournaments on the weekends, which we all know. I mean, if you're going to a tournament, you're not just playing one game a day. Club volleyball, I know from talking to athletes that I've worked with, can be up to like 5 games in a day. Sometimes just dependent on how good the team is and what level you're playing at and what tournament you're at. And AAU basketball is probably very similar to that. I don't specifically know. I haven't had those specific conversations.
Yeah, it's probably at least 3 on the first day, and then depending on how good you are,
right,
how many you're playing on day 2.
Right. So all that, it just kind of compounds, and if those individuals are not getting that adequate rest time, plus I didn't even touch on, which I'll say it now, the travel to get there. Yeah. I mean, the AAU showcases, I got to go all the way out to Las Vegas or down to Chicago or whatever. Like, it's just a lot of time and everything that these kids have to put in to try to, I don't want to say make everybody happy, but to kind of appease everybody and to what they think to help themselves be better at whatever game that they're trying to pursue.
Yep. Marissa, you also spent time at a high school.
I did. A couple high schools.
A couple different high schools. Mm-hmm. See anything different? Because it was in a very different geographical location.
They were.
But yep. I got to imagine similar trends?
Yes, I feel like to an extent. I think so I worked at a high school down south, and down south it was a little bit, I don't want to say like lackadaisical, but they definitely like did take a little bit more time to recover between seasons, and so not necessarily everybody was doing club sports like either, so it was strictly just like school athletics.
Okay.
And they were just fine. But again, it's also like smaller schools, rural schools.
Right.
That like you have a freshman and a senior playing on the same team, or you have 8th graders and freshman football players playing together, which there's a difference there. So, but I would agree.
So obviously with all of that, like, you know, you talked about just even the commitment, and you can refer back to our podcast with AJ Jagum on, you know, like, they're not sleeping to recover from that, and obviously they're not probably eating well enough or just generally recovering well enough, which is something we also talked about with Doc Erickson. I know one of the topics we want to talk about is the role of the athletic trainer, and Marissa, I'll let you take this one away, and just like how that can help, and ultimately kind of tying into what we're trying to show with this symposium and this kind of overall general thing that we're pushing out there. So I'll kind of just turn it over to you on that one.
Great. So I feel like the athletic trainer is the first line of defense, right? That's how we always tout ourselves, or is almost similar to like a primary care physician. Kind of, we know a little bit about everything, but parents don't really see that as much, and either it's because they don't know what the athletic trainer knows, or what our schooling is, or what we do, or whatever.
Tape ankles and give water, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like, whatever reason, if there's an athletic trainer at the event, they're there for a reason, and that is to help your child if there is an injury in whatever capacity. If it's like a acute injury where they're getting a fracture, or if it's, hey, his wrist has been hurting for a while, can you take a look at it? Like, feel free to utilize that AT, and that's there, because that's why they're there. And I would just say to emphasize to parents that we really do have the athlete's best interests at heart, and we can really navigate that return to play. So say your kid gets hurt in whatever mid-basketball season or something. You go to the doctor and you get a diagnosis, but then you don't know where to go from there, how far to push them or whatever, and that's where I think really we shine, so that we can mitigate some of those overuse injuries that we do see, and then really help them get back into prime condition. So, if there aren't athletic trainers at the events that you're there, then I feel like parents should be asking questions, and maybe some of them are, and maybe some of them aren't, and those questions can be directed to like coaches, to the sport organization staff, whatever it is. You should be aware of what are the procedures if something happens to my kid. Like, if he gets hit in the head with a soccer ball, can he go back into play? Does this coach know what he should be doing? Not necessarily that the coach is doing a concussion evaluation, but they can recognize, all right, this kid got hit in the head. He's saying he feels dizzy. He needs to sit.
Right.
Something like
and
that.
And even some officials with that, because I know they're, at least in the collegiate level, and you guys could elaborate on the high school, if they have any suspicion, they're supposed to send the person off.
They're supposed
to get evaluated.
Yeah.
Supposed to. Yeah. And I understand they've got their own things going on.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's something that has been supposedly emphasized.
But then that's something that changes too with like tournaments, where you're getting refs from all over the area. So you're getting a hodgepodge group of people who, yes, know the rules for everything, but don't know what the specific rules are for that venue, or where an AT is located, or where whatever is located, right? Because they're traveling in or whatever. Mm-hmm. So the NATA, National Athletic Trainers Association, has a checklist that parents can utilize, or coaches or refs, or again, sport organizers can utilize, and then they'll go through a little bit of the basic steps of everything that we do. One, is your coach CPR and AED certified? Is your ref CPR and AED certified? 2, what do they do if there's an injury? Is there, ice available or something? Or what other services are there? 3, where's the nearest hospital? Like, that's not really something you think about until like something bad happens.
Right.
Yeah.
And then a couple other things such as like weather if you're outside, so lightning policy or heat illness, something like that. Like, do they know steps that should be taken? And also, can they remain calm if they have to call 911? Which I think are all very viable questions that parents should be asking.
You have anything to add to that? No, I was going to transition to the next kind of question on that. But
I was just going to touch on, Marissa had mentioned just overuse injuries, and had mentioned the concussion as an example, but also like the Little League pitcher who there's generally not going to be an athletic trainer covering every Little League game that your child is going to be playing in, but your child is having shoulder pain. Like, what do we do about that? Well, and we always kind of say, don't ignore the shoulder pain. Don't turn it into something that's going to be bigger than what it is. Have them rest right away. It'll probably resolve within a couple of days.
Yeah.
And it turns into a non-issue versus if you keep on pushing it, well, I have a little bit of pain, but it's not too bad. I can play through it. 2 weeks later, I got a little bit more pain, but it's the middle of the season. I don't want to miss it. It's an important game. And now 2 weeks after that, my arm is about ready to fall off. Well, now I just create a big problem for myself.
Right.
And now I have to have some big intervention because, and again, kids have another kind of compounding factor. They have all those open growth plates in their body, whereas adults, we're done growing. Sorry, folks. But by the time we're 18, 19, most growth plates in the body are closed for both boys and girls at that time. So beyond then, nobody's really going to do any more growing. So just to have those open growth plates and everything, while they're participating, it's just very easy to get all these other stresses to those areas and not really know, I guess, how to treat it or what to do for it other than, well, put a bag of ice on it, because that seems to be the typical go-to for everything. So,
yeah, what I was going to kind of ask about, just like on a more global thing, is we were talking about high school rates of participation and just how much they're doing, and obviously within our profession of athletic training, there's a lot of push to have athletic trainers at high schools, and I feel like it's framed, and rightfully so, more as the if something's going to happen, as you reference, the acute thing at the event when it happens. But if you can get, a person in a capacity where they can look at the trends of that 3-sport athlete or help establish something, because I think if it's available, which again, this is still going out there, but like if you have a good strength and conditioning coach that is also noticing those things, that, it's not just go all year long, because nobody can really tolerate that, but having that athletic trainer that gets to know the athletes and what they're like, and to your point, Corey, is the encouraging, let's come in and make this a 1 to 2 day thing, not a 1 to 2 week thing, and ultimately a 1 to 2 month or longer thing, just by mitigating that or making a policy of people need to like kind of downshift, whether it's just practice or whatever it may be, throughout your sport.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys have any specific thoughts on that. I think that could, it's another selling point for the athletic trainer for, yes, you're going to save the big lawsuit issue by having them there, but you could also, in theory, save a lot of medical costs to a lot of people. By, again, if it's a sore shoulder, you're turning it into just maybe some slight overuse to not a torn rotator cuff muscle or something else.
So before coming over here and working specifically down at UWL, and now more recently out at Mayo Clinic, before coming out here working in the high school scene and everything, I kind of saw it firsthand, and now it's just anecdotally speaking, but kind of saw a transition halfway through my time at the school that I was covering. It was kind of a shift in thinking where essentially if you were an athlete that you went out for a sport, you were going to be involved in some sort of structured strengthening program like all year round. And yes, you'd have the ebbs and flows of in-season training versus out-of-season training. We know that out of season you're going to be lifting harder and training harder and everything. And then in season, you kind of dial things back a little bit, but you're still doing enough to, keep up with everything so you don't completely lose it all. And I specifically, like, once that change happened, I saw, at least coming through my training room, it was a lot less overuse, tendonitis type of things that would come through. Kids generally didn't come through unless it was acute stuff that happened. So the football player that breaks his leg,
it's the quote preventable stuff, which
all that stuff goes. Like, once you implement that style of training, that kind of program, and you actually have a team around you, like the coaching staff, the parents, everything that's bought in, you actually see those overuse injuries not go away, because you can't prevent everything, but it's dramatically decreased, and it's absolutely amazing to look. And I don't have specific numbers to share with everybody, but just from what I can remember, the first few years, it just seemed like there was a lot of nagging problems that I was there, and then even the last couple of years that I was there, so a difference of about 8 years in between there, can't remember a whole lot of nagging stuff. It was the big ACL tear that we still, unfortunately, can't prevent the contact ACL injury from happening, or the broken arm from happening, or that acute ankle sprain that the kid gets twisted in a pile. Like, unfortunately, that's always going to be there. But the rotator cuff, impingement, tendonitis, Achilles tendinopathy, patellar tendonitis,
shin splint
issues, that stuff tends to get better and go away. So just and that was just a simple change in thinking of everybody is going to do some sort of strengthening or program just in general, so that we're all in shape essentially all year round and can handle the demands that the sport is asking of us, while not overdoing it when we're in season, out of season, whatever the case may be.
I think that speaks to a really important thing of just not forgetting the basics.
Yeah.
Just you can prevent a lot by being basically strong. It doesn't have to be the fancy exercise or all the fancy equipment. Like, basics and movement. You talk about some of the knee pain. If we can get people to use their hips, a lot of times the knee pain goes away. We've talked about it a lot. Even at our level, like, for most of the athletes that we deal with at UWL, like, the basics are not only going to help them prevent or be more injury resilient, it's also going to still get them some really good benefit to be a better athlete, just because they're there. We've talked about running, some strength, and I think we've seen some shift a little with adding some of that to some of our runners and whatnot, just some very basic strengthening things. But can you make form better so that it's not the repetitive stress that doesn't need to be there? And I know it's helped a lot with, we don't treat with football as much patellar tendonitis as we used to, but we're overemphasizing that they squat properly. And I think that's made a huge difference in a lot of that we're doing. So
I think that comes back to, like, coaches, just how creative can you be, and maybe taking a day a week to do something other than your specific sport or those specific movements you have to do in your sport. So you can do a lot of other, like, yoga. Cross country does yoga once a week for a little bit of recovery. I think gymnastics does, like, meditation or something like that, which can help, especially in the high school population or
Football's
younger.
gotten in the pool now on Sundays just to go float around.
So go have your athletes do something different, because they're moving in the same patterns the entire time, and they've been doing that since they were 10 years old. And we've seen other research that would suggest that if you're specialized too early, then your movement patterns are all gone, and your motor development as a whole is, like, shot. Not shot, but it's affected. So just have them go off and do something else that they want to do that's fun, and then they'll kind of self-regulate.
If you don't, an example of that too, right off the top of my head, if you don't believe us what we're saying, go to a hockey rink, and a kid that's been skating, that's all he's been doing for his entire life, go ask him to take the skates off and run for you, and you tell me what it looks like. There's just a few athletes of mine back in the high school setting that stick out in my mind that And we'd always joke about it. They were big hockey guys, and that's kind of was their thing. They tried to still do other sports too, so they still got some of it. And they would always say, Corey, when it comes down to it, I'm just a hockey player, and I skate on land, I skate on ice. It doesn't matter.
Just wear out the inner side of their
like
shoes.
The swimmers, where they're in the pool all the time,
Right.
they can swim, but then you have them go run a mile outside, and it's like everything hurts.
Yes.
Because they can't, because they're not used to it.
Right.
I distinctly remember when I was at GA, we had a girl in bilateral patellofemoral, like correctional braces.
Yeah.
And she's a swimmer.
Yeah.
It was just like, what are we doing? Like,
Right.
there's something so wrong about this picture. There's no way they should be walking around. And it's because of dry land training. It wasn't because she was swimming. But,
Right.
yeah, just, man. Like, is the cost worth, the risk of doing it?
Right.
Like, anything else around this that you guys want to touch on that we haven't got to?
I mean, I guess the biggest thing for everybody to kind of take away, just
Good. That was kind of my last question.
So to avoid kind of the overuse things in general from happening and the chronic issues in general, I always kind of fall back on the 10% rule. All that's saying is from week to week, you're not increasing your training load by more than 10%. So just an example, if you have an individual that is used to running for 20 minutes 4 days a week, you're not all of a sudden the next week making them run 30 minutes 7 days a week. That's
Right.
obviously a difference of more than 10%. And you're probably going to wind up seeing something hurt because you've jumped too much. So I guess I would just reference that as just kind of a good go-to. And just again, another example that pops into my head is that 10, 12-year-old boy that is a pitcher that, they pitch at practice or they throw at practice or whatever, which they have their pitch counts that they're following in games to make sure that they're actually following that pitch count if they're in multiple leagues and pitching on different teams. Even if
it doesn't reset when you put on a different jersey.
Right, and even to the extent that Dad's home from work, hey, Dad, can we go and throw a few in the backyard? Those pitches still count. Like, it's still an actual pitch.
Yep.
So it still has to count in that total. Like, you can't ignore that, even though it's just backyard throwing the ball around with Dad. Like, all that stuff matters. And it, if you're again talking about growth plates and issues there, every little stress it adds up. So one throw might not seem like a lot, but when you're dealing with a sore shoulder, one throw might be the next, like that might be all you have is one more throw, in which case I would say you should be scaling back a little bit. So definitely I would say that 10% rule is a good rule to follow.
So that is how you would take something that is complicated and make it simple?
Right, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just making sure so we come full circle.
Oh, okay.
So turning that over to you, Marissa, just kind of as the final question, in this whole, because obviously it can be very complicated in terms of balancing things. How would you take that and make it simple based on what
I feel like
see?
the simplest thing that you can do as a parent would just be like listening to your kid. And yes, it's a little bit of a fine line between wanting to push your kid through pain so that you're not completely bubble wrapping them, but then also you don't want to push them too much. So really, if they have some pain that's been lingering for a couple days, what's the harm in taking like a couple days off?
For sure.
So just pay attention to your kid, basically. Like, trust them because they know their body. They know
Fair
what
enough.
they're feeling. So
We'll have more on that coming up with our future episode with another healthcare provider who has a youth athlete or four, and just how they've gone about that. So, well, thank you guys. Appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
yeah, it's great.
We'll see everybody on the next episode.